Let's unpack this. Today we are doing something a little different. We're going on a journey based on a listener request into a really foundational theological concept. And we're not just traveling back to the Garden of Eden. We're going further back, all the way back to eternity past, to the time before the world was even made.
Exactly. The mission today is to try and understand what our sources call the unshakable foundation of salvation.
And the premise here is just stunning. The idea that redemption wasn't some kind of reaction to human failure, but was actually the original master plan.
That's right. It revolves around something called the pre-creation covenant, the idea that the rescue was in place, before the victim had even fallen.
So to really get this, to appreciate the certainty of it all, we have to start with divine knowledge, because that just sets the stakes so incredibly high.
It does. I mean, if we're talking about a plan made before creation, we have to start with God's foreknowledge. The sources are very clear that God knew in perfect detail exactly what was going to happen.
That's a staggering thought. Not just the happy ending, but the entire messy, painful story.
The whole thing. He knew about the fall of the angels, the fall of humanity that would come after, and, the whole spectrum of sin and evil and suffering that would follow.
He knew the cost.
He knew the ultimate cost would be the suffering and death of the Son.
Yes, which of course raises that huge question. If he knew all that, why even go through with creation?
And that's a fair question. But for this specific deep dive, the sources focus less on the why of creation and more on the certainty of the plan for it.
Okay.
The crucial distinction they make is that this plan of salvation was not a cleanup operation.
So not a plan B. It wasn't
Yeah.
God watching humanity mess up and then scrambling to figure out a rescue.
Not at all, according to this material. The master plan for redemption, the sacrifice, the resurrection, everything, it was all formalized before creation took place.
That reminds me of an analogy you mentioned earlier.
The one about the foundation.
Yeah. If you knew you were building a house on a fault line, you wouldn't wait for the earthquake to happen.
Exactly. You'd engineer an unshakable, reinforced foundation from the very beginning. And that's what the sources suggest this pre-creation timing is all about.
I love that.
Yeah.
Because it just shifts the whole dynamic. It transforms redemption from an emergency measure into a foundational promise, something unchangeable.
And this is where it gets really interesting. This isn't just theory. The sources point to specific passages, almost like hidden documentation in the prophets.
Right, specifically Zechariah chapter 6.
Zechariah 6, verses 12 and 13. This is identified as the key text documenting this eternal agreement. It's like finding the ancient blueprint.
Now, most people think of Zechariah as dealing with, the immediate rebuilding of the temple after the exile in Babylon. So how does this historical passage become the key to an eternal plan?
It's the language. The text starts with the temple, but then it pivots to this grand prophetic figure. It says, "The man whose name is the branch, he shall build the temple of the Lord."
And it continues, "He shall sit and rule on his throne, and there shall be a priest on his throne, and the council of peace shall be between them both."
Right. And that's the key.
Okay, let's unpack that. The branch is pretty universally understood in these sources to be the Messiah, the Son. But the agreement itself is what's really unique here.
The defining phrase is that council of peace. This isn't just a conversation. This is the formal ratification of the plan. It's the moment the Father and the Son, you could say, negotiated the terms of the Son's mission to achieve peace, reconciliation.
And the outcome of that council defines Christ's future role, right?
Yeah.
It has to be a dual role.
It has to be. The text says the branch, the Son, will sit on a throne to rule. That's the king. But it also says there must be a priest on his throne.
Why both? Why couldn't he just be a king or just a priest?
Well, think about what the problem is. Sin. Sin is a legal offense, which needs a king to administer justice and rule, but it's also a relational offense, which needs a priest to mediate and offer a sacrifice.
So a king can't atone for sin, and a priest can't enforce an eternal victory over it.
Precisely. The whole plan hinges on the branch fulfilling both roles at the same time. Royal authority and priestly sacrifice, all in one.
So this council of peace was basically the divine agreement on the whole operational plan.
The incarnation, the mission, the enthronement, everything needed to both legally pay the debt and spiritually restore the relationship.
So if Zechariah 6 is the blueprint, what are the final provisions? What comes out of that council of peace?
The sources lay out about 4 critical steps. First, the incarnation, the Son, the branch, agrees to come in human form.
Okay.
Second, he completes the mission, the ultimate once-for-all sacrifice on the cross.
Let's pause on that once-for-all idea. The sources say he handles all of humanity's sin at once. What's the significance of that?
It means the legal debt was paid in full, in a single act. Because it was planned in eternity, the payment wasn't just for sins committed up to that point. It covered everything, past, present, and future.
So a complete transaction.
A complete and permanent transaction. It guarantees the outcome because there's no need for any other payments or conditions from our side.
And the third and fourth steps.
The third is victory, the resurrection. This is where he destroys the power of sin and death. That's the kingly power kicking in.
Right.
And fourth is ascension and restoration. He goes up as king and ruler, and because of his finished work, that broken relationship with humanity is finally and eternally restored.
And this whole secret consultation, this plan, is called the Covenant of Reconciliation.
And that covenant is foundational. It's the root system for everything else in the Bible.
So you're saying every other covenant, with Adam, Noah, Abraham, Moses, they aren't actually new deals.
That's the key insight. They are all just historical expressions of that one original pre-creation promise. They're progressive revelations of the same plan.
That simplifies the entire biblical narrative. It ties thousands of years of history back to a single moment in eternity.
It connects all the dots. It shows that redemption isn't a series of disconnected chapters, but one single focused story.
And this isn't just buried in Old Testament prophecy. Jesus himself confirms it.
He does, right before the cross, in John 17, in his high priestly prayer.
What does he say?
He's praying to the Father and says, "Father, I want these whom you have given me to be with me where I am." And then he says this, "Then they can see all of the glory you gave me because you loved me even before the world began."
Before the world began. There it is. He validates the timing himself. The love, the glory, the plan. It was all set before sin was even a reality.
And what's so fascinating is how that timing dictates the very nature of God's love. It means that love has to be unconditional, what the Greeks called agape.
Why is the timing so crucial for the conditions? It seems almost backwards to plan the rescue before the person is in trouble.
Well, think about it practically. The sources stress that if this covenant, this agreement, had been made after humanity sinned,
Say right after the fall in the garden.
right, then it would have to be conditional. It would have required something from humanity, perfect obedience, some ritual, something. We would have to bring something to the table.
But because it was made before we even existed,
There was no one there to meet any conditions. It was a perfect, sealed agreement made solely between the Father and the Son. It couldn't have any human conditions attached.
that changes everything. Our security isn't based on our ability to hold up our end of the deal.
Exactly. It rests entirely on their ability to fulfill their perfect agreement. And that is why the love is unconditional. It's not dependent on our performance or our merit.
And the application of this, for you listening, is maybe the most powerful part of this whole deep dive.
It brings a kind of deep peace, an unshakable freedom. If you ever find yourself doubting or measuring your performance, wondering if you've done enough, just remember this. Your salvation rests on a perfect agreement made in eternity.
The foundation is entirely divine, utterly secure.
Mm-hmm.
So what does this all mean? We've traced the foundation of redemption all the way back to eternity. We've discovered this secret counsel of peace.
A divine negotiation that happened before time.
And we've confirmed that the love driving this whole monumental plan had to be unconditional, a commitment made before we could ever fail.
And that leads to the final, really reflective question the sources leave us with, and it's a powerful one.
Go on.
How is it possible that the divine could plan for death and sacrifice for beings who didn't even exist yet? Beings who, they knew with perfect foreknowledge, would ultimately reject and crucify the Son.
Wow. To plan for the cross, knowing the full extent of the betrayal, the rejection, and to still go through with it.
That willingness to proceed, knowing the full costs, that is the deepest truth of this pre-creation covenant.
It's a love that sees everything and yet chooses to embrace us anyway, until the very end.
That's the kind of perfect, unconditional agape love that gives meaning to everything else.